This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Glatstein. Welcome, everyone. So this will be perhaps the last segment on the subject of Nusach HaTfilah. And for this segment, we sort of segue into a little bit of a different subject, a fascinating topic, and that is the identity of the Arizal himself. Because the Chassam Sofer, in his view of the development of the Nusach HaTfilah, Chassam Sofer understood that the Arizal demonstrated the Kabbalistic intentions and focus and meaning of the Nusach of the Sefardim. And the Chassam Sofer says we do not have correspondingly somebody among the Ashkenazim who showed us the Kabbalistic meaning and intentions of Nusach Ashkenaz. In fact, there's a very long tshuva on the Shal Shuvas Minchas Elazar in number 23 in Chelek Orachaim Siman Yud Aleph, and he quotes on page 9 in a footnote that some people want to suggest that the Goyin Mivilna, he did to Nusach Ashkenaz what the Arizal did to the Nusach of the Sefardim. And the Minchas Elazar says, Has mila hazker kain, Chas v'shalom, to suggest something like this. Why? Because it's true that all the various forms of tefillah were enacted al derech hasoid. However, it would seem from the Likutei Hagra, the Gra wasn't really writing the true Kabbalistic meaning. He was just writing chidushim kedarkei b'kodesh in all mikzois haTorah. But he didn't make it that this is the absolute perush of the tefillah the way the Arizal did to the Nusach of the Sefardim. So again, the Chassam Sofer holds that for those of Ashkenazic descent, they're required to daven Nusach Ashkenaz. For those of Sephardic descent, they're required to daven Nusach Sefard. Why sometimes you have people of Ashkenazic descent who daven Nusach Sefard if they are Mikubalim, the likes of the Hafla and Rav Nosson Adler? Why? Because we only have the Kabbalistic meaning of Nusach Sefard, not of Nusach Ashkenaz. Why do we only have it of Nusach Sefard? Because the Arizal made it on Nusach Sefard. Why did the Arizal make it on Nusach Sefard? Because he was a Sefardi. Because he was a Sefardi. And says the Chassam Sofer, if he was an Ashkenazi, he would have made it on Nusach Ashkenaz, but he wasn't an Ashkenazi. He was a Sefardi. But you have to notice the way the Chassam Sofer phrases it, and that is the Chassam Sofer phrases it, that the Arizal was Haya Sefarad. Not Sefardi. He was Sefarad. Does that mean something different than a Sefardi? If you remember, the Shal Shuvas Maram Shik in number 13 in Archaim Sim Mem Gimel, on page 4, on the second line, he writes, V'hariya kadosh haya me'eretz Sefardiim. Doesn't write he's a Sefardi. He's from the land of the Sefardiim. Kol yimei chayav, all the days of his life. Al kein gila kol hasoidos al pi nusach tefillah Sefard. So we have the opinion of the Chassam Sofer that the Arizal was Sefarad. We have the opinion of his student that he was Me'eretz Sefardim. Now, today, let us examine the Chida. The Chida writes, in number 21 in the Shem HaGdolim, Chida Mareches Rabbeinu Hoari. Says the Chida, Rabbeinu Hoari, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria Zatzal, the Yisrael Gadol Shemai, his name was great in Israel, Nitzutz Moshe Rabbeinu, Efes Ketzei Ma'aloisav, some, the edge of his attributes, Kasav, Rav Chaim Vital, and the Hakdama of the Eitz Chaim. And you want to know the awesome power of the Ari? It's written in the Sefer Emek HaMelech, and in Matzrei Flech Chochma, and in Shivchei Hoari, and he had Ruach HaKodesh, and he was a Baki B'chol Chachma. Turn over the page. Comes the Chida. And in Ois Gimel, the Chida writes, Rabbeinu, Merab Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, Zatzal, Shamanu, Shahayam Mishpachas Marshal. Wow, that's the bombshell. That the Arizal says that the Chida says the Ari was from the family of the Marshal. Now, who was the Marshal? The Marshal was Rav Shlomo Luria. What was the Marshal? Ashkenazi or Sefardi? Ashkenazi. Of course he was Ashkenazi. If you don't know that he's Ashkenazi, then you don't know nothing. right? Of course the Marshal was Ashkenazi, one of the great all-time Ashkenazic Poskim, the Yam Shel Shloimeh, the Rav Shloimeh Luria. He's buried in the city of Lublin. He was the Rav in Lublin. And in fact, when Rav Meir Shapiro became the Rav in Lublin, one of the things that he said was, here we're in a city where great people presided. How dare he get up to become the Rav of such a city? It says, "B'makayim gedolim al tamid." You're not to stand in the place where great people stood. How could I stand in the place of the Marshal? And basically, Rav Meir Shapiro, Kedarka B'Kodesh, the way he interpreted this statement, "B'makam gedolim al tamid," that if you're in a place where great people stood, al tamid, you can't remain an oimed. You have to take it further. You have to advance it. You have to climb on their shoulders and take it to the next level. But the Marshal was one of the greatest of all the Achronim, and is clearly an Ashkenazi. Well, wait a second. If the Arizal, his last name was Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, and the Marshal, if they're from the same family, then wait a second. That means, apparently, that the Ari was not like the Chassam Sofer says, a Sfarad, not like the Maram Shif says, Me'eretz Sefardim. He was an Ashkenazi. So it seems, now it's not clear, he just says, I heard he was from their family. Maybe they were third cousins, second cousins. But they would come out then that this would be a very unique machlokes. Sometimes you have machlokes in Lamdas. Sometimes you could have a machlokes in Metzias. But a machlokes, whether someone's an Ashkenazi or a Sefardi, that comes out, the Chassam Sofer holds that Ari was a Sefardi, and the Chida holds he's an Ashkenazi. Well, let's look in the Tshuvas of the Chida where he writes this even more explicitly.
The family through the mother?
Ashkenaz, the last name usually goes by the father. Look in Shas Tshuvas Yosef Oimetz. These are the Tshuvas of the Chida, Siman Chaf number 22. V'asher otzisa v'amarta lamano diyacha minog eretz Yisrael b'inyan kefel hapsukim halal. You wanted to know about the custom in Israel. Zois ashav el libi. I'll tell you the following. Ki b'eretz Yisrael hu minog Sfarad. The minog in Israel is the minog of the Sfardim. V'yesh b'ira kodesh Yushalayim daled bate knesiyos. There are 4 shuls in Jerusalem. Umedrash echad, and one beis hamedrash shemoitzian sefer Torah b'yam hanahogen v'kula minog Sfardim. Every single shul in Jerusalem in the 18th century were Sfardim. Hagam she'iza zman hoya beis hakneses Ashkenazim. The truth is, it's not like Ashkenazim never had a shul in Yerushalayim. Yeah, some time ago they did. But ze yosem mishmayim shana shenezbata beis hakneses Ashkenazim berishas hagam. The Goyim already destroyed it 80 years ago. So basically, in the mid-18th century, every single shul in Yerushalayim. You ever hear of Yerushalayim? It's not in New York. Yerushalayim is a city in Eretz Yisrael. Every single shul in Jerusalem was Sefardi. So are there any Ashkenazim? Yeah, there's some Ashkenazim. Where do they daven? They daven in the Sefardi shuls. What do they do Yom Naram? It's a halbat tzara to be an Ashkenazi in a Sefardi shul during the year. What are you going to do Yom Naram? Yom Naram, they make the notorious house minyan. Okay? Of Yom Naram ha-Ashkenazim espalalim be'eze bayis samach l'beis ha-knesiyos ha-Sefardim umishum de besvuni de liba yasivna okay. V'yadati. And I know ki ratzon chodas koshtem reyemes amarti el al eres ki harbe Ashkenaz yarakosh nanami kubas. So now the question is, you're going to want to know that the charity that's collected in Jerusalem is collected mostly by the Sefardim. How could an Ashkenazi take tzedakah from the Sefardi's tzedakah box? That's morally unethical for an Ashkenazi to take tzedakah money from Sefardim. Ki harbe Ashkenaz yarakosh nanami kubas tzedakah michluke atmecham Sefardim. And how could such a thing be? And you probably want to know, are Ashkenazim even allowed to daven next to Sefardim? V'yadati asher b'libcha de'echa Ashkenazim matzla tzuyim es-Sefardim. By the way, the Ramad Valley, Rav Moshe David Valley, he was a Rebbe and a disciple of the Ramchal. He writes in the Sefer Halikutim that Ashkenazim and Sefardim, there's a famous machlokes in Harios. What's greater, Oikar Harim or Sinai? Is it better to have a lot of Bekiyas, to be a Sinai, to know a lot of material, or to be Oikar Harim, to be very sharp? That's what Rabbi Obam likes to say over from a Pinchas Hirschsprung, that they asked for Pinchas Ursprung, if the Gemara says Sinai is better. It's better to be a Baki than to be a big lamdan. But the question is, Oiker Harim is someone who could uproot a mountain. Sinai is also a mountain. So let the Oiker Harim come and uproot Sinai. So so a person, he would if he knew where he was. He lost. He doesn't know where he is exactly, right? But anyway, so the Ramad Valley says Ashkenazim are lamdanim, sharp. They're sharper. Their minds are more honed in, sharp. They're Oiker Harim, and the Sefardim are Chachamim, Sinai. They know a lot of material. That's so the Rambam is called a Chacham. Anyway, that's what he writes. And he says, what about the Italkim? the Italkim, they're Shvach in both ways. And the people from Eretz Yisrael, they have both, he writes. They have both. Both. Okay. Anyway, he says, Da kimitzad hasvara taskel, you should know. Ashkenazi, Sefardi, v'italki, v'kiyoytze, kol echad she'yisrael b'seder tefillah, yoytzer, yodches, be'ezanol, mishlashton yatzer. You're yoytzer, whatever you daven. Whatever you daven, you're yoytzer. Mi lanu gadol mi Rabbeinu Ari, shehu haya Ashkenazi. So here we have black and white. Was there anyone greater than the Ari? He was an Ashkenazi, from the family of the Marshal. And he davened with who? The Sefardim the whole year. How you talking such a thing? An Ashkenazi is going to daven with Sefardim? So don't be so, picky. You're going to say, I'm an Ashkenazi, I can't daven with the Sefardim. Is there anyone greater than Ari who was an Ashkenazi himself? He davened with the Sefardim? Except for Yomim Noraim, he davened back with the Ashkenazim. So this is a Peladik Machlokes. Chassam Sofer says that Arizal was Sefardi. Maram Shik says he was from the Eretz HaSefardim. And the Chidah says, no, he was an Ashkenazi. And he even went back to daven with the Ashkenazim on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Who are you going to listen to? The Chassam Sofer or the Chidah? Who are you going to listen to? So what was his lineage? Was he Ashkenazi? His name seemed to be, he had an Ashkenazi name.
He was both. One father was father and mother. One was Ashkenazi, one father.
Well, what difference does it make what your mother's from? Doesn't matter. Your mother needs to switch to your father. So what difference does it make what the mother is?
Maybe he won't.
That might be true. In other words, if his name was Luria Ashkenazi, his father must have been Ashkenazi. So even if his mother was a Sefardi, but you follow the Nusach of the father.
They say that Deutscher are not Germans, they're Polish. And Polak are not Polish, they're Hungarian. It's the same thing, Ashkenazi. They use that name because
No, but he's saying he's from the family of the Marshal. And also, I will not discuss anything Hungarian in this year. Okay, so, but if he was from the family of the Marshal, then he had to have been Ashkenazi. So, what do you do when you have a machlokes between the Chassam Sofer and the Chidah? Usually, if it's a matter of halacha, especially for Ashkenazim, mi lanu gadol me Chassam Sofer, but comes the Minchas Elazar. On the other hand, the Chidah is also one of the all-time great Gedolei Yisrael.
He's a Sefardi, interesting.
If you look in Shal Sechuvas Minchas Elazar, Chelek Orachaim Siman Yud Aleph, number 23, is going to be page 9 on your sheets. It's in a very, very big piece. I guess I could have made 2 more shiurim out of it, but I think this is going to be the last year on the subject. In the middle column, the first words are about 10 lines up. Yishev Klal, Gam be'ikr dvarav, shekasav achsam sofer. Regarding the middle column, about 10 lines from the bottom, Gam be'ikr dvarav, shekasav achsam sofer, that the Ari was a Sefardi. But look in the Shal Sechuvas Yosef Oimetz of the Chidah, the Ari was Ashkenazi, from the family of the Ashkenazim, Luria, from the family of the Marshal. And his name is Mochiach Alav, and that's what he writes in the Shem HaGdolim. Now, who are you going to listen to? The Chidah or the Chassam Sofer? V'nei bevadai hachidah zatzal yada yoiser. The Chidah knew more. Why? Liyoisei karev sham. He was closer to there. Now, what does it mean he was closer to there? Does it mean he was closer in time? When did Arizal live? From 1534 to 1572. The Chida lived 1724 to 1806. Chassam Sofer lived 1762 to 1839. Does he mean he was closer in time? What difference does it make if you're closer in time? He probably means he lived closer to where the Arizal lived than the Chassam Sofer, right? Eretz Yisrael is closer to Tzfas than Hungary. Hungary is very chashav, but it's Pressburg is still further from Tzfas. Number 2, V'yalid Eretz Artzenu HaKadoshah. The Chida lived in Eretz Yisrael. Number 3, the Chida was a great historian. The Chida was a great traveler. One of the remarkable features of the Chida was he was called the Tayer Gadol, Choyker L'chol Tachlis. He was the great investigator, the great traveler. In fact, says the Minchas Halazar, if you look in the Pri Etz Chaim on Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah, he says the Hiratzain that is said when you open up the Aron, they found it in the Ksav Yad Kodshe, the Ari, in his Ashkenazic Machzor. The Chida used the Machzor of the Ashkenazim. In his Kavanos of Yom Kippur, when he would say the words Aye in Kesser, even though it says in the Sefer of Reb Chaim Vital, maybe it means, Reb Chaim Vital says maybe this is what the Arizal learned before he learned the Chachmas Emes. He says to say the Piyad Ha'oiches B'yad, which is the Piyad of the Machzor of the Ashkenazim. And the Chida writes in the Yosef Oimetz that the Ari davened on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur with Ashkenazim. By the way, the Pa'as HaShulchan also brings that. Furthermore, in the Siddur of the Ari, in the Siddur of Shabsi, in the topic of Yitin L'cha, he says that when the Ari davened by the Ashkenazim, he would say V'yitin L'cha. When he davened with the Sefardim, they don't say V'yitin L'cha, he would say it at home. Why would he say it at home? If he's a Sefardi, Sefardim don't say it. The answer is because he wasn't a Sefardi, he was an Ashkenazi. V'chein b'shar ha'kavanos. It's brought that the Ari would only say the piyutim of the Ashkenazim. Likewise, in the Sefer Shivchei Merav Chaim Vital, it says that he had a dream, and the Arizal said, and he saw in the dream, the Ari was the Sefer Torah of the Ashkenazim. So we see from here that Ari was considered in Tzfas to be an Ashkenazi. That's why his name was Rabbi Yitzchak Luria Ashkenazi. Not Rabbi Yitzchak Luria Sefardi. And therefore this demonstrates that since the Ari was an Ashkenazi, why would he put Kavanos onto the Sefardi Siddur? Not like the Chassam Sofer says that the Arizal corrected the Nusach of Sefardim because he was a Sefardi, but rather like the Divrei Chaim says, and like the Hasidim say, that Nusach Ari is not Nusach Sefard corrected. Nusach Ari is a fusion of Nusach Ashkenaz, Nusach Sefard for people whose soul is lost and don't know where they come from. Right? We said the fundamental machlokes between the Nusach Ashkenaz people and the Hasidim is the Hasidim say that Nusach Sefard is the wild card Nusach. It's a combination and fusion of all the good parts of all the Nuschos. And the Rav Moshe and the Chassam Sofer reject that. And they say Nusach Ari, Nusach Sefard is just a Kabbalistically polished version of the Tefillah of the Sefardim. Comes out, we have an incredible machlokes. That the Ashkenazim say that the Arizal was a Sefardi, and the Sefardim say, and the Hasidim say he was an Ashkenazi. It's like nobody wants him to be them. Why not? Very pashut. Because everybody wants to champion their own Nusach. If you're an Ashkenaz, if you're a Nusach Ashkenaz person, so you have a big kasha. If the Arizal was an Ashkenazi, how could he daven Nusach Sefard? You know why? He's a Sefardi. That's how he could daven Nusach Sefard. But the Hasidim who want to champion Nusach Sefard, they want to show that even if you're of Ashkenazic descent, you could still daven Nusach Sefard. Because otherwise, what business does somebody who come from Germany daven the Nusach of people who come from Morocco? Oh, the Ari, the Ari was an Ashkenazi, they say. You know why he daven Nusach Sefard? Because it's the wild card Nusach. So really, the whole sugya hinges on the identity of the Ari. Was Ari an Ashkenazi? Or is Ari a Sefardi? If the Arizal was an Ashkenazi, like the Hasidim say, so now we have a raya that even someone who's an Ashkenazi could have a Nusach Sefard. But the Chassam Sofer says not true. He wasn't an Ashkenazi, he was a Sefardi, and that's why he made Nusach Ari. The truth is, was he Ashkenazi or was he Sefardi? You can't be both. Nobody is ever both. No. The answer is probably very simple. The answer is, his name was Ashkenazi. His name was Loria. Your name is Loria, you're an Ashkenazi. There's no question that Ari was Ashkenazi. So what does Chassam Sofer mean? Also very pashat. The Arizal was a Yasaim. So his mother took him to live with his uncle in Egypt. So his father was an Ashkenazi, but he didn't grow up by his father. He grew up by his uncle. His uncle was Sefardi. So the Chassam Sofer never said that the Arizal was a Sefardi. He says he's Sefard. What does Sefard mean? The Maram Shik explains what the Chassam Sofer means. He lived his whole life in the land of the Sefardim. Why? From the time he was young, his mother took him out of Eretz Yisrael, and he brought him to Egypt. So Avada in the blood, the Hasidim want to say that Arizal was Ashkenazi. Of course he was, but that doesn't show and doesn't demonstrate that if you're an Ashkenazi, you could switch to Nusach Sefard. He never switched to Nusach Sefard. He was a little child and his father passed away. So he went to live by the Sefardim. That's why the Chassam Sofer says he perfected the Nusach of the Sefardim. Because he was Sefard. If somebody is a Yassim, and they grow up by their uncle, they adopt that particular Nusach. That's probably what happened. There's no machloikis whether he's Ashkenazi or Sefardi, but we're going to end off with the following very interesting discussion in the Stei Chemet. Okay, in number 29 on page 16. Harav Hoari, the Arizal, Hayami Mishpachas Marshal. He's from the family of the Marshal. Came Kasav Moran Chida. The last sheet, you can just flip over the whole booklet. By the way, if you want to keep this is probably our last session on this. If you want to keep the booklet, you could keep the booklet. If you give it back, you're not getting it back. Okay, but you're welcome to hold on to this. Okay, so it says the Stei Chemet and the Klali Apoiskim Siman Tesvav Oisiyad. The Ari was from the family of the Marshal. So says the Chida. In the name, in the Shem HaGedolim, Mareches Gedolim Oisiyad, and he says Al Pi Hashmua. The Chida did not have first-hand information. He heard this. According to this, says the Stei Chemet, he was Ashkenazi. And likewise, the Rabbanon and the Lev Chaim, who's the Reb Chaim Falaji, and his son, the Yafal Alev, also says the Ari was Ashkenazi. But in the footnotes on the Sefer Yafal Alev, in the Sefer Yishrei Lev, he brings that the Chassam Sofer says he was a Sefardi. And he says, the Chida writes that he was Ashkenazi. So he says, if the proof is from the fact that his last name was Loria, says the Sefer Yishrei Lev, I once saw a letter that the Ari wrote to the Marshal, we're not related. So you can't bring a proof from the fact that his last name was Loria, because the Ari Taka perhaps was not related to the Marshal, as evidenced by this supposed letter that the Ari wrote to the Marshal, that they're not related. Says the Stei Chemet, the Yishrei Lev wants to prove that the Arizal was Sefardi from the fact that the Ari wrote to the Marshal is not related. Pink fakert. If the Ari wrote to the Marshal that they're not related, that's a raya that they're both Ashkenazim. Because if they weren't both Ashkenazim, why would the Ari have to say, by the way, we're not related? Why would they think they would be related if they come from completely different chalakim of Klal Yisrael? The fact that he said they're not related is even though we both come from the Ashkenazic name Loria, we're still not related. Otherwise, he should have said Noch Beser. Not only are we not related, we're from different Shvatim. You're an Ashkenazi and I'm a Sefardi. Why didn't the Arizal say, I'm a Sefardi? B'chlal, not only not related, we don't even, we're from different halakim of Klal Yisrael. Is a raya, they're both Ashkenazim. It's a raya, not like the Chassam Sofer. V'li ha'hedyoid b'hor manasei demar. Says the Stei Chemet, in my opinion, Nira de mimakom shabal lahasig siyo kamasayeh lamar and chida. From the place that he wants to bring a raya to the Chassam Sofer, that he was a Sefardi is a riot to the Chidah that he was an Ashkenazi. The Lulei Haya Ashkenazi and not been Ashkenazi. Why would the Marshal even? The Marshal says you're from my family, and the Ari says we're not family. Why would anybody think they're from the same family if one's an Ashkenazi, one's a Sefardi? V'gam Rabbeinu Ari should have said I'm not even an Ashkenazi. The fact that the Ari said that we're not from the same family is not a raya, he wasn't an Ashkenazi. There are many Jews who have the same last name and they're not related. So here's the upshot of this whole thing. Let's look at the last 4 lines of the Stei Chemed. Hin charoya margala bepum rabbani hasfardim. Hin charoya we're going to see as follows. Margala bepum rabbani hasfardim. It is common, it is frequent in the mouth of the Rabbanim HaSfardim. Meaning, what do the Sfardim say? What do Sfardim maintain? Rabbeinu Ari Haya Ashkenazi. Rabbeinu Ashkenazim Nakti Shahaya Sefardi. Who says that? The Chassam Sofer and the Maram Shek. Okay, so we have 2 interesting machlekes. Was Arizal Ashkenazi or Sefardi? If you're Ashkenazi, he was a Sefardi, and if you're a Sefardi, he was Ashkenazi. What about Nusach Ari? What is Nusach Ari? What is Nusach Sefard? That's also machlekes. Chassam Sofer, Maram Shik says Nusach Sefard is a kabbalistically brushed up version of Nusach of the Sefardim. And if you're of Ashkenazic descent, you daven Nusach Ashkenaz, unless you're a big Makubal. That's what the Chassam Sofer says. The Hasidim say no. Hasidim say that Nusach of the Ari is a wild card Nusach. And even though it was originally instituted only for people who are of great Kabbalistic inclination, nevertheless, the Baal Shem sort of advised that in the last generations before the coming of Mashiach, where people don't quite know what Shevet they belong to, this is an appropriate Nusach that works for everybody's neshama. But the main thing that we started the session with, the series with, are the words of the Nefesh HaChaim, and that is the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah who formulated the tefillos, injected into the tefillah tremendous kayach, tremendous power, and merely by saying the words, even perhaps without kavanas hamilos, the tefillah is very effective. As long as you have a kavanah for the first pasuk of Shema, and the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, and the Peseches Yadacha, sometimes a person goes to shul, what did I do? You did a tremendous thing. Just saying the words of tefillah, they're already injected with whatever power they need to have. So we hope Yibon Shem should be makabel all of our tefillos and whatever nusach we daven, and we await. Now when Mashiach comes, what are you going to daven? So it depends. It depends. We said, according to the Chassam Sofer, presumably, those of Ashkenazic descent will continue to daven Nusach Ashkenaz. Those of Ashkenazic descent who daven Nusach Sefard, Mastama Mashiach will be able to tell us what the kavanos of Nusach Ashkenaz are al pi Kabbalah, and those of Ashkenaz who daven Nusach Sefard will go back to daven Nusach Ashkenaz, I assume, and the Sefardim will daven their Nusach. What do the Hasidim say? Hasidim are maskim. Hasidim say when Mashiach comes, then everybody will find out what shevet they belong to, and they'll daven the nusach of their shevet. Nusach Sefard, the Maggid says Nusach Sefard will be obsolete when Mashiach comes. If you look at number 16, the Likutei Amorim says, he says, V'em yishal hashaya le'ezet tzarech heim yud gimel sharim, v'halaya yud gimel hu koilo kulam. The answer is, if you know what shevet you belong to, Yoiser Toiv Likanos Kalecha B'Shar Shlai. So Eliyahu Hanavi is going to tell you what nusach you come, what shevet you come from, and you're going to daven the nusach of your shevet. So we hope for the great day when Eliyahu Hanavi comes, and we'll know exactly what kind of siddur to buy, which edition, which nuschais, and.
Did you get an answer to your question about how it started?
Yeah, well, so if you want to know about who formulated Nusach Sefard. I don't have first-hand information, but what I was told was that even the Baal Shem himself, they found the Siddur of the Baal Shem probably daven Nusach Ashkenaz. And he had on top the Kavanos of the Arizal on top, Now, the kavanas of the Ari were not always consistent with the traditional Nusach of Ashkenaz. So it developed that in order to follow the pattern of the model of the Baal Shem, certain things were manipulated to fit into the Nusach of the kavanas of the Ari. Then the different Talmidim, so to speak, developed different ways of doing that. But what I'm told is that the Baal Shem did not officially institute Nusach Sefard. Rabbi Glatstein, have a great day.
So Gori is buried in Holland?
In Lublin. I was there.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.